I went here 2001 to 2005.
My name is Bob Pomerantz, and I attended Vaughan Road from 1970 to 1975.
I'm Levi Cassidy. I graduated in 2012.
I'm Mimi Scown, and I also graduated in 2012.
My name is Jack Parker. I'm from the class of 1952.
1950 to 1955.
My name is Freeman Redmond. I started here in 1939, and I left in 43.
This is our school, Vaughan Road Academy, nestled near the scenic intersection of Vaughan and Oakwood. It's not the prettiest street corner, it's true, but we have a metal coconut tree, and it's a neighborly place where the shopkeepers all know your name. It's a school like any other, with its yoga classes and flower-filled canoes. We've got Jews to the east, Italians to the west, Jamaicans to the north, and a friendly smattering of Portuguese, Filipinos, and of course just your run-of-the-mill white people. In our 91-year history, a lot of famous people have passed through these doors.
The very thought of you, and I forget to do the little ordinary things that everyone ought to do. I'm living in a kind of daydream. I'm happy as a king, and foolish though it may seem to me, that's everything. The mere idea of you, the longing here for you. You'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you.
Although Vaughan once held 2,000 students, the school is emptier these days than it's ever been. And in June 2017, we close. But before the lights go out and the doors are locked forever, let's look at our history and go back to the beginning. Okay, maybe not that far, but we can go back to the beginning of the last century, which was not as exciting as Murdoch Mysteries would have you believe. In the 1920s, Toronto was a provincial city of just over 500,000. Colonial in its mentality, Presbyterian in its public morality. Parks were locked on Sundays, and alcohol was only legalized in 1926. The city, however, was expanding and diversifying, and developers were looking north. Vaughan Road High School was built with much of its surrounding neighborhood in 1926. The farmland had been the traditional territory of the Wendat, who had once had a large village just a bit north and to the east. Vaughan Road had actually been an indigenous trail until 1850, when it was built as a plank road to help farmers transport their produce north of the Vaughan, a somewhat shorter route than taking the TTC today. Though the school was opened in 1926, with its 12 teachers and principal, the building was not ready until 1927. For several months, the students had to take classes at the Oakwood United Church. The space was cold and drafty, which is why today Vaughan Road keeps its classrooms at a steady 30 degrees Celsius. The school opened with much ceremony, and the cornerstone was laid by Ontario's Lieutenant Governor, who had a very unfortunate surname. By 1928, Vaughan Road was a collegiate, and by 1931, they got a brand new wing of the school. Today, we can't even get our Wi-Fi to work, though we do have hot water in the toilets. The baby-faced principal of the time was Dr. George Evans, a man who clearly couldn't get another job because he served as principal at Vaughan for 31 years.
People from senior school when I was in grade 9 used to refer to him as Gus. Another name that he became known for was Uncle Bulgy because he was a good-sized man. But he dressed proudly. He always wore a suit and a tie with a vest, and he always looked very professional in his manner.
Principal Evans ran into some trouble in 1939 when he invited a local CCF candidate named Dr. Luke Teskey to give a talk at the school. Evans was hauled before the board for a disciplinary hearing, but a delegation of Vaughan students went to the meeting to support him. Their presence might have made a difference. because Evans wasn't reprimanded. The subject of Dr. Teskey's talk? Venereal disease.
This poor fellow's in mighty bad shape, and all because of...
By 1939, Canada was at war, and Vaughan Road students and staff threw themselves into supporting the war effort, and not just by taking pictures of themselves in conga lines.
I remember in grade 10, it was good because we didn't do much schoolwork. All we were doing was preparing things for the men overseas.
The knitting club made socks and sweaters to be shipped to soldiers overseas. Tape holders were collected to become blood serum bottles. Staff and students volunteered at the Red Cross Blood Bank Laboratory, and Principal Evans sent every Vaughan and former Vaughan student serving in the war a copy of the school yearbook, the Acta Studentium, complete with conga lines. The township of York at this time was a predominantly working-class neighborhood, overwhelmingly Irish in its early days, before becoming a Jewish, then an Italian neighborhood. It was fertile ground for one of Vaughan's veteran English teachers, Joseph W. Noseworthy, to launch a political career as a prominent socialist member of Parliament. In 1942, thanks in part to the efforts of many Vaughan students who campaigned for him, Noseworthy became the CCF's first MP in York South. Even more impressive was the fact that he defeated Arthur Meighen, the federal Conservative leader and a former Prime Minister. Noseworthy would serve 3 terms as the MP for York South. He also had amazing eyebrows.
Now why is Bobby clearing his desk? Oh, now there won't be anything to fall off and make noise. You keep on your desk only things you need. That's part of keeping the room quiet.
By the 1950s, Vaughan had become a predominantly Jewish school, and the place was bursting at the seams. After years of lobbying, students organized a petition to renovate the facilities. By 1959, they got a pool, an enlarged auditorium, and a brand spanking new cafeteria. Many of the teachers were now veterans, though Vaughan saw its first new principal in 30 years.
Well, I have many memories. I remember there was initiation. That was great fun. You had to wear your clothes on backwards and do all these things for the older students at their command. For example, scrub the front steps of the school with a toothbrush. I remember pushing an eraser down the hall with my nose and then carrying grade 13's books.
Discipline was strict. Students were only permitted to walk on the right side of the hallway. Only teachers could walk in the middle. Lanes were delineated by subtle lines in the floor, and student prefects were appointed to enforce the rules on their fellow classmates.
One of the science teachers, she was, I think, head of the biology department. I used to teach English on the 2nd floor, across from her lab. And I was late one day, and I was running down the middle of the aisle. And it was always the students going one way had to walk on this side of the center line and I was in the middle. And suddenly I felt this 2 hands grab me and threw me into the wall and said, "Students will walk on the right side." And I said, "Okay, but I'm a teacher." And she went, "Oh, well, you can walk on the right side too." Let me go.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't that bad. By the 1960s, things had loosened up. Much of the old guard began retiring. The Hall-Dennis Report, commissioned by then Education Minister Bill Davis, introduced many reforms, such as an end to lockstep teaching and a more relaxed relationship between teachers and students, who could now have individual timetables rather than move through the same classes with their home form all day. In 1966, the school also got a massive addition, which transformed the L-shaped school into a triangle. The 1960s at Vaughan saw the escalation of student protests. In December 1968, VRCI students went to Queen's Park to oppose Memo 18, which threatened to extend the school year into June. Not long after, VRCI's female students joined a walkout to oppose school dress codes and demand the right to wear pants.
When we went to school, into high school, we weren't allowed to wear slacks. And towards the latter part of my time at Vaughan, that I think became a big a big issue, not just at Vaughan, but in other high schools.
By the 1970s, the Jewish population at Vaughan was gradually overtaken, then replaced by Italians. Within a decade, Vaughan was basically an Italian school.
On parents' nights, for the Italian parents, we would hold a special presentation for them. The students, the grade 12 and 13 students, would put on skits for them, and we were able to speak to them in their own language, which worked out really well.
One of those Italian students, who claimed to have spent his share of time in the principal's office, eventually came back as the school principal.
Grade 9 at Vaughan Road. It was the swim class for grade 9 gym. And we were told that we would all be, keep the bathing suits on the bench because you're all swimming naked. It was scary, it was weird, there was back hair. The girls didn't have to swim naked. Don't ask about the reasons.
By the 1980s, the stodgy style of the George Evans years had given way to a looser atmosphere. In 1981, Susie Skublix was declared the student most likely to succeed sexually, whatever that meant. Jamaicans had been settling into the neighborhood since the 1960s, and a few had attended Vaughan Road Collegiate. By the 1980s, their numbers had grown, and they established a solid presence in the school. At the same time, the Italian population of the school began to decline. At first because the neighborhood had simply gotten older, but then, in the last days of the Bill Davis government, came a devastating blow. Bill 30 was the controversial bill that extended public funding to Catholic secondary schools. It was a devastating blow for a public high school in a mostly Catholic neighborhood. For a while, there was talk that the Catholic board was looking to share or take over the school. The community fought back, but over the next few years, as Bill 30 was phased in, enrollment continued to drop. Not everyone, however, noticed.
We were probably around 500-600 at the time I was here, and it seemed like a busy place. I knew a lot of people, but there was still a lot of people that I didn't know, so it seemed like a healthy population.
Where in the mid-70s the parking lot had been filled with portables, by the mid-80s the school had empty classrooms, though not for long. A daycare was added on the first floor, while the second floor got the Interact program, which catered to students with outside commitments in athletics and the arts. We've taught most of the cast of Degrassi. On the plus side, the school had become more diverse than it had ever been. Filipino students established themselves as a significant presence in the school, as did Kurdish, Albanian, and Russian students, among others. Unfortunately, the decline in enrollment continued. By the mid-90s, Vaughan was threatened with closure, but Principal Terry Bader gave it one more shot. Vaughan Road Collegiate was dead, but Vaughan Road Academy was born. Uniforms were introduced, as well as the International Baccalaureate program. The idea was to draw back families from the Bathurst side of the neighborhood, and for a while, it worked.
I think IB prepared me for university, definitely. I think I was more equipped, I had more skills, more techniques that I could use. But going back, if I could go back, my friends that are my really good friends now were from the regular program, and there are only a handful of them now. But looking back, IB it prepared me for the future and what I wanted to do with my life.
Vaughan Road Academy came into being just in the nick of time, because that same year, 1997, saw the introduction of something that would change education in Ontario forever. Bill 160 and its sister policy, the Fewer School Boards Act, pulled billions of dollars out of the education system, ripped up teacher contracts, centralized control of education, and forced the amalgamation of 6 different GTA school boards into one mega board. Teachers and administrators staged a 3-week walkout to try to stop the bill, and Vaughan students marched beside them. 15 years later, Vaughan students would stage a walkout again, this time in support of their teachers, whose collective bargaining rights were attacked by Bill 115. The Mike Harris government also eliminated OAC, or Grade 13, which drastically reduced the public school population by nearly 20%. Despite this setback, Vaughan Road Academy's enrollment continued to grow.
Vaughan was very vibrant and alive those years for me.
By the mid-2000s, Vaughan's enrollment had climbed to nearly 900 students. But optional attendance, increased competition from specialty programs at nearby schools, as well as 3 new IB programs on the board, combined with demographic changes to the neighborhood and housing prices beyond the reach of most families, together created a perfect storm, and the slow, final decline began.
5 years ago, there were only about 600 students, and they were very few enrolling every year, and I know the teachers were quite stressed about it, and they talked about it a lot. It was very open channels of communication, because I think there was a certain degree of lawlessness and just sort of general. There were I think fewer rules than there might have been before. Fewer, definitely less strict, I think, than it might have otherwise been.
Being in a declining school was very unauthoritarian, where these hierarchies that you have set up to preserve the so-called social order just don't really seem to matter anymore in the face of impending closure. And so it seems like it would be a little crazy and anarchic, but the reality is that it allowed people to get a little closer.
Though Vaughan continued to put on plays and Black History assemblies and win championships and generally pitch beyond its weight, enrollment continued to drop. Finally, in December 2016, after 91 years, it was announced that Vaughan would close its doors in June. It's hard to believe a school with such a storied history will be closing, particularly since just this month we finally got our cafeteria painted and a brand new display board. But maybe it won't be forever.
Whenever Vaughan reopens, I think it's important for the people to remember the beginnings of Vaughan, which I understand effectively came from the community deciding that they needed a school to be able to educate their kids locally and be a place to bring people together.
I'd say it was very diverse and inclusive when I was attending the school. I loved it. I thought it was great.
I'm proud to have gone to Vaughan Road. I feel that it provided a very strong academic foundation that led me into excelling in my career. I've done well in my career, and I just want to say thank you.
So many of my colleagues have passed on that I know how they would feel. They would miss not being a part of this closing. I'm sure that many of us are sad that we worked very hard to build up the school to a high academic level, and then for whatever reason things changed, and we did our best.
It's going to be kind of sad, I think, to not have this school around. I can't visit when it's summertime and I'm not in university, or I can't, I can't come into one place and see all of my teachers.
Oh, it's definitely a sad time for myself. I'm so happy that I was part of Vaughan Road as a student and also as a teacher, because it definitely is a special place that holds so many memories for so many people. And I'm very sad to see this happening, but I'm hopeful that maybe in the future there will be something that maybe I can still be a part of, and I hope it's not the complete end of Vaughan Road.
Good night, sweetheart. Sleep will banish sorrow. Good night, sweetheart. When we meet tomorrow, near and hold you. Near and here I'll hold you. Good night, sweetheart.
Yesterday I heard a lover sigh, goodbye, oh me, oh my. 7 times he got aboard his train, and 7 times he hurried back to kiss his love again and tell her, tootsie, goodbye. Tootsie, don't cry. The choo-choo train that takes me away from you. No words can tell how sad it makes me. Kiss me, titty, and then